All
All
right,
right.
welcome to another episode of the Invaluable Educator with my co-host Jeffrey. Jeffrey, say hi.
Hello.
Okay, so as you mentioned last week, the importance of the Invaluable Educator is to talk about truly how valuable our educators are, how valuable our education system is. And so today's topic is really about how education is the root of all other professions and career pathways and industries. And so we're just going to have discussion about it. I have some questions. If you guys have comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat and let us know. So Jeffrey, this was kind of like something you were like, I want to make sure we dig deep into. This is so
Yes.
timely. So talk a little bit about why this was so top of mind for you.
I think this is top of mind for me because one, it's like, I think just going back to our conversation, educators are the ones who get the first dibs, right, on training the minds of the next generation. And I think when it comes to preparing them for industry and just honestly, whether it's to work for another company or to start their own company, there's certain things that we need to explore there. Like, is this just given the state of the job market, first and foremost, right? And given the state of college degrees and things like that, is that a conversation or an area we want to dive deeper into when it comes to how effective is this and how is it working? It's kind of like where my mind is at when it comes to it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so interesting that you say the college education piece because I was just having a conversation yesterday with someone who was basically like, the US has built their capitalistic system off of this idea of college and putting people in debt, really, right? With the student loans. And, even when you file for bankruptcy, student loan is one of the few things that can't come off your bankruptcy that you can't renegotiate. Yeah, exactly. So
Mm,
you become sort of like this indentured servant to the system. So we are pushing all of the kids. I mean, and we know we've seen this for about 30 years. We've been pushing people to constantly go to college. Then we're like, take out these student loans. We're asking 18-year-olds to even understand like compound interest, something we don't even teach them in school. And then they're trying to wonder, wait, I've been paying on this student loan for 30 years. How does my principal not have barely moved, right? And so I'm still I'm still beholden to this debt versus an opportunity where you could go into trade schools. And we are seeing some of the schools, especially in here in Miami. There's been a movement in New Jersey and in New York City, I think a little bit in California, where we're seeing more and more folks talk about getting certifications and going to trade school and having
right.
the ability to come out without debt, first and foremost. And secondly, their prospects of building wealth and having a higher salary is like higher, right? And so we bucket these careers as white collar, which we're supposed to respect the people who do white collar, and then blue collar, and we sort of like poo poo that. But really, when you look at the statistics, people who do blue collar jobs, that's your garbage folks, those are your plumbers, et cetera, oftentimes have actually better financial outcomes than those who do white collar jobs and are administrative assistants or managers or secretarial work or do more office work. And then they also have a lot of debt because they went to college to have the privilege of that position. And so you were seeing a lot of pushback there. So I love the fact that you brought up, like, is college the way to go? We're seeing now, right? Like here in Florida, some of our governors kind of taking over some of our state schools. People are upset about it. Alumni are upset about it. But maybe college is not the answer anymore. Maybe it is just going and getting your certification. I mean, you can go to Microsoft and go to Google. There are so many free certifications out there that you can go, or a very limited amount of money you have to pay $100, $200, et cetera, to go get a certification. You do that, and then you can come out being a full stack developer. You could come out being a digital marketer.
Right.
You come out
Yeah.
having said that you've done Python, or you know how to work with large language models, which are basically the basis for a lot of the AI that we're talking about. Jeffrey, did you have anything to add to that?
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned blue collar jobs also, because it's like you're beginning to highlight these multiple pathways that maybe we weren't told about when we were, coming up in the traditional education system up to this point. But now more ways have opened up. And I think I'm curious about that, right? It's like you mentioned boot camps, you mentioned blue collar, you mentioned certifications. All of these are different ways. And it makes me reflect on even my own college experience and my own college education and thinking to, see what some of these boot camps cover, right? Even like full stack boot camps, they cover like full scale like software development, and like they actually showcasing your expertise and things like that. And I think back to my education, even in computer science, and I think to myself, it's like a lot of it was very theoretical, like when it comes to industry applications, how up to date is the curriculum is really my question.
Yeah, that's a great point. I do find that I think college and universities do still live in this white tower sort of mindset, and a lot of things are theory, and they're not often, well, here's what's happening in the real world. Here are some practical use cases. I mean, you are seeing some colleges kind of thinking about that, especially as they're expanding what entrepreneurial work is looking like, et cetera. But you are really, I think, in general, the curriculum does seem to be very theoretical, very based off of research. There's always a lot of reading and writing, no matter no matter what major you go through, right? There's a lot of reading and writing on books and theories, and then you're going through lectures, and which is great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, a sister loves to have a philosophical conversation. It is fun. I enjoy that quite a bit. And there's a time and a place for that. And I think it hones in on certain, it makes you build a certain part of your brain, which I think is definitely helpful as you continue to grow in career. But I do think that oftentimes colleges do lack some of the practical knowledge that you can apply. Yeah, I mean, there are internships, but I don't know if they do a really good job necessarily of vetting to ensure that the internships are actually really thoughtful for students. I mean, it's certainly when I was in school, and I won't say this was my case, but I knew a lot of folks who were interning and they were basically like just a glorified office assistant and had nothing really to do. I mean, it was adjacent to their major, but it really didn't have much to do with their major. So I thought, that's an interesting point. What is the theory versus the practical, versus boot camps really kind of give you the actual, here's the skill you need. And then oftentimes we'll bring in some real world experiences. And I will say we're doing that in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. We're doing an excellent job of having partnerships with the community, so that oftentimes our students are working with businesses, doing like internship consulting. When they do go through interns, it is like we make sure that the job description actually aligns with the things that the students want to do. Obviously, it's all age appropriate, and we all understand like this is their first foray into a career. So, you obviously have to have some gratis and grace, especially around their age. But we do want to make sure that those interns are actually like really practical, and they can understand kind of the work that they would be doing from an entry level perspective within their chosen field, or as they're just experimenting. The other thing that we're seeing, especially in the high schools, and we're talking about career exploration, and it's kind of funny because this is cyclical. There was a time when going to school and getting your trades was actually something that happened quite a bit in the 70s. And then we had this whole move everything to colleges, especially with privatized loans and student loans. We could talk about that too, because the political side. But anyway. But yeah, so we're seeing that again. And what's great, and one of the things that I am really proud about, is that a lot of our students, when they graduate, at least those who are going through STEM programming, so that's your science, technology, engineering, math, or CTE, which is known as career technical education, they not only graduate with their high school diploma, some of them are also graduating with their associate's degree, or like literally a professional license, right? So myself and so tech and Navi AI, we just gave out scholarships for students, the nursing students at William Turner Tech High School, because those students graduate not only with their high school diploma, but the ability to get board certified as a licensed professional nurse. So they can go right into nursing if they choose, or they can work as a nurse as they're considering going to get their associate's degree, or if they want to become an RN, which is the next step above an LPN. But they have this ability to really hop into a career and have a really good salary that not only is helpful for them, but also helpful for the family, and of course the larger community, because the more money people make, the more money the stronger the economy is, because then you've got more money that can circulate. So this idea that we have in the United States that people should be hoarding money is actually quite strange, because if you hoard money, it actually takes down your GDP, and it does not create a strong economy. And you need a strong economy to have a good society. It just doesn't make sense. It's really counterintuitive, in fact.
Wow. That's powerful, especially the part where you mentioned that they can jump from, kind of jump directly into industry, like it's like a direct pathway, it's a direct bridge, and I'm more curious about that. Like, how are we creating these bridges, right? Miami-Dade's one example, and that's great, but it's like, how are we multiplying the effect across the nation, and even like just like beyond local districts, beyond local Broward County and Miami-Dade County. I'm not sure Broward's doing that, by the way, but I know Miami is pretty cutting edge. Yeah, so I'm kind of curious from your standpoint, if you were to, because you are you are an education consulting consultant.
Yeah.
If you were to help a college redesign their curriculum, redesign their approach to educating and skilling students for the future of work, how would that look for you? Or how would you begin to even think about that in terms of approaching them?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think community colleges have always gotten a bad rap. It's like, oh, you didn't, you couldn't hack it in high school and you can't quite go to college. So you go to this weird middle place called a community college. But actually, when you look at the community college systems of California, if you look at the community college systems of New York, and now Miami-Dade, I've become quite familiar with MDC. These are amazing colleges and opportunities. And I would actually start there. First of all, they do have pretty much an open enrollment. Just about anybody can attend because those are your public community schools. But what they do is they have campuses that are specific to the thing that you're looking for. It's extremely affordable to be able to go to the community college. And because they're of the community, they really seem to understand what's important to the locality of which they are a part of. And so I have definitely seen community colleges really, truly be of the community. I think sometimes universities and colleges are like gate themselves away from the community in which they are residing in, as if they're not a part of the community. And I think that's super problematic. So what I've seen are the community colleges asking for businesses to be to come in as guest lecturers, to form partnerships with them. So you see a lot more openness and willingness to partner and collaborate and create like a really strong educational ecosystem. So I think the community colleges are actually, in my opinion, I think we need to have more community colleges, and I think we actually need to put more money behind them because they just have a more thoughtful way of really ensuring that everyone in the community is able to upskill, is able to kind of work in harmony, to have different types of opportunities and events that they have open to the public. And, honestly, you just don't see that a lot even from some of the bigger colleges and universities. They just kind of, I think to your point, live in this like white tower kind of thing. And I think colleges and universities also have an elitism problem.
Yes.
They only want, whatever they consider is the best of the best based off of your grades. But, grades are not normed across the United States. And then you have SATs, which we know are actually quite rooted in anti-racist policies. Not only is the test itself designed for a certain way of thinking, but the test never came out. SAT never became a thing that standardized tests never became a thing until Black people were starting to get into colleges and universities. And they were like, oh, well, we need to figure out a way to stop this influx of the wrong people getting this type of education. So why not create a standardized test that's based off of our standard and not necessarily, one that accounts for some of the racial disparities that have happened to our community. And we can go into all of that. But anyway, so you've got these systems that are quite antiquated, that are quite rooted in anti-racism. Who are quite rooted in racism and in inequities, et cetera. And we use that as a platform to decide like who's worthy enough to go into a particular college or university. That's what they tell us, but we also know that 40% of most people who get into some of the elite schools, and that's including the Ivy League schools, 40% are actually nepotistic, meaning that they have a legacy. Their parents went there, grandparents went there, so it doesn't actually matter if they have any kind of merit whatsoever. They just get to go because they have the last name or they have a certain amount of zeros and or net worth to their family name, and that allows them to get into a space. And so that's 40%. So when everyone was talking about affirmative action, the biggest affirmative action is actually legacy. So anyway, and again, legacy helps those who are colonizers. I mean, point blank. So when we're talking about the university structure, we need to talk about this idea of elitism. And so why are we pushing people to an elitist framework? Then why are we sort of making them indentured servants to that elitist framework through student loan debt? When I think there are so many more alternative options that students can look into that actually have just a bigger return on their investment in terms of salary, the ability to build wealth, and of course, quality of life.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it's like what I'm wondering is it a self-reinforcing system because it's so expensive to attend some of these elite universities that people get into debt and then the perception is thus surefied, if you will. You know what I'm saying? Like it's then strengthened, like, oh, hey, it's worth it to get into debt to go to this, or you know what I'm saying? And I feel like it's like how much ROI have we seen there? One, but then also I have seen in certain other areas too. If you put, I went to a Harvard or a Yale X, Y, and Z, and you're, for instance, going the non-traditional route, which is, you're not directly going to an employer immediately. Maybe you're founding a company. It can help you get funding. You know what I'm saying? Because you're putting your name dropping, you're putting the right names on. So I'm kind of curious to touch on that. Like, do you see value there? And I guess also that's still elitist, but what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it is elitist. Just because someone went to Harvard or Yale doesn't automatically assume, or should not automatically assume, that they're more intelligent than anybody else. I mean, so yes, I think you're right. You see that. You see like, oh, we're named up, we're Harvard, Yale, and okay, that's wonderful. And again, I am someone who went to school, and I have quite a few degrees to my name. So it's not necessarily that I'm like, don't go to college, but also I'm more like, let's think about the system and the structures that we have provided a framework. And I think it's more than okay if the majority of people decide college is not the way to go and we wanted to do more certification programs. But yeah, I mean, you do see that kind of name dropping happening when you're going for VC. This is particularly if you're going for VC funding and you're like, oh, I went to Harvard or Yale. But you also have to remember, like, okay, so the majority of people who are VCs, as we know, are white men, and a lot of them themselves have gone to some of those Ivy Leagues. So to them, it just means like, oh, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that if I believe I'm smart, then because I went to Harvard, then someone else must think that they must also be smart because they went to Harvard, and so they should be able to do this entrepreneurial work. But I also want to say that to be an entrepreneur, it's not just about your intelligence. I mean, obviously that's a part of it, right? But there's like a whole bunch of other things that go into being a great leader, to being a great people manager, that frankly, not only do K-12 schools not worry about, neither do colleges or universities. I don't see a lot into what does it mean to be a good relational, what does it mean to actually manage people in a way that's like really thoughtful. People will talk to you about managing your business. Yeah, that's true. But how do you actually manage people? How do you actually lead people? And no one talks about those things. And I'm like, well, that's why you have such a crisis, I think, of confidence in leadership, why you have people who are in leadership roles who probably should not be there, who make other people's lives miserable, why you do have micromanagers. I was talking to someone the other day, and he was like, you're giving me that look like you think I'm a micromanager. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, I was like, we're going to have to talk about how you need to like relax, because if you're good at building a team, why do you need to micromanage them? It doesn't even make sense. But maybe you're not good at building a team, and so that's another piece that we need to talk about. Like, how do you suss out? How do you actually hire folks? You might know how to write a really great job description. Do you actually know how to hire the right people on your team? That's something else that no one really talks about. So we touched upon this in the last episode too, which is, listen, the hard skills, the theoretical skills, the hard skills, all of those things they have a place and they're important. but the lack of attention to soft skills, I think, is a huge problem. And there's a statistic that says that 95% of people in the United States are unhappy with their jobs.
Wait,
95%.
sorry, 95%?
95% of people are unhappy
Ooh,
with their job.
wow. That
So you
is
talk about the return on investment. Was it worthwhile? I mean, I guess the colleges and all the private student loan people who are making a whole bunch of money off of your misery, yeah, they're happy. But are we as a society happy with the investment that we put into funneling everybody to colleges and universities? And I think that what you're seeing, especially in my generation, so I guess I'm a Zennial, I'm between Gen X and Millennial, older Millennial, young Gen X, I don't know, something like that. I'm in the in between generation. You're seeing a lot of folks in my generation who are just like, was it worth it to have all of these, to have this student loan? And um, am I even working in the field that I thought I'd be working in when, I got, so that's another piece, like the mismatch between what I'm actually doing in my career and my major. And I think that's a lot of things that we see happening out there. And I think that ultimately there just seems to be a dissatisfaction with life. A dissatisfaction with life, and work being a major component, because you spend really the majority of your time at work. The way that it's structured currently, you spend 40 hours of your day, 40 hours of your week, if not more, in an environment that makes you unhappy. That's crazy to me. It's crazy town.
that's not good, and I think it's also not productive for the development of society, because it's like on a more psychological level now, right? Say you're working at a job that you don't like. Say it's somebody that they're working at a job they don't like, and they have children, right? So they're married, they have children. They're bringing that stress home. They're bringing that frustration or that aloofness or wanting to disconnect, from maybe communication or people home to their family, and that's probably affecting their children, affecting their, just the framework of their household. So it's really interesting to me how yeah. I see somebody asking, Justine saying, am I a micromanager? But we can get to that. But essentially, it's the overall framework. Because it's like, again, when it comes to education having not education, industry having roots in education, and industry then impacting development of society, right? Development of families, development of generational legacy, development of child rearing. Like, I feel like there's larger implications there.
Yeah.
We may not have enough time to dive deep into that, but it's just something that I feel like I want the audience to think about too when it comes to, do you have workplace satisfaction? How is that impacting your overall life? Yes, 95% of happiness is unsustainable. Like 95% of people being unhappy with their job, that is an unsustainable way to build society. So I'm thinking now solution oriented. You mentioned community colleges are partnering with local businesses. You mentioned that they're kind of leading the way forward in addition to blue collar work, right? I'm curious, for those who are watching, either in education or entrepreneurs looking to get involved, or anyone just who cares about the cause, how could they get involved in creating that revolution?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a few different ways. So, from a political standpoint, most school boards are voted in. So, most school board members are voted. So, look for your municipality and make sure that you get involved in your local school board elections. I mean, that's first and foremost one of the things that you can do. Also, when the school board meets, those are open public meetings. They have to be. So go to your local public meeting, see what's coming on the docket, see who's a part of their school board, see what they're talking about. And there's a time and a place where the public can talk. And so as community member, you have the opportunity to voice your concerns about what's going on in the schools, or say, here are some solutions that I think we can start looking into. So that's one concrete thing that you can absolutely do. So even if your school board is not elected, when they have school board, and if they're not elected, that means that they're appointed usually by the governor, or maybe the mayor of the city, or the county. So find out if your school board is not elected, who actually appoints them, because that's the person you need to be thinking about, like, do my politics align? Because they're going to appoint people to the school board who have their same political leanings and standpoints. And anyway, here in Florida, we're seeing some controversial things happening with the governor making some university appointments, right? And so it's just important that you kind of know how that political part of education works. But regardless of all of that, school board meetings are public. They have to be. So, and there's a time where as a public, you can go and you can either voice your frustrations, or you can say, I love what you're doing, keep this up, and whatever. So there's a time that you can get involved in that sense. The other is most schools that I know are very, 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 very open to having community members come in and talk to students about their career pathways, about how they've gotten through life. Is most schools have some kind of career fair that you can get involved in. So I would certainly look to see, and in this case, you probably would have to have some kind of relationship with someone in the schools who knows when these things are kind of happening, or can get you in touch with a couple of principals or whatever. And they're always happy to have people from the community come in and volunteer their time and interact with students. So that's another way that you can get involved in just from an easier standpoint from the school. Now, if you want to get a little bit more involved, and let's say you want to teach a course, or you want to pilot a program, again, talk to principals. Principals are always happy, or teachers are happy if it's easy to do so, to pilot a particular program. But you can also go to my point, your community college, and you can propose a class, and if they like it, then you can literally teach a class at the community college. It's not a difficult thing. I started teaching at community colleges when I think I was 22 years old. I started teaching at a community college. I put a whole course together, and they were like, this is great. And so we did that work. So you can, if that's something you want to get involved in, you absolutely can. And I will also just say one little thing that I've always had this idea and this belief. So if I had the opportunity to just recreate society, American society, one of the things I would say, it's so similar to some countries that make you do a year in the military. I actually think that we should do a year of service. I would prefer that most of that service is in education, but not everyone should be around kids. So, but I think a year of service after you graduate high school and before you go into the next iteration of your life, whether that's college, trade school, etc., you do a year of service. I think that there's something in the US, I think that we as a country just generally lack empathy and compassion and humanity for others. And I think that 1 year would allow us to walk in other people's shoes, especially in the education realm. We would see it's not easy to be an educator at all by any means or stretch of the imagination. We started this saying that education and educators are the root of all other industries, because ultimately at the end of the day, outside of your home, where you're getting your most knowledge and education from, it is from the schools, for better or for worse. It's in front of their educators. And so one would think that you want your brightest and most talented populace to be in front of your children, helping to shape their young minds as they go through their educational journey, and as they think through what kind of person they want to be in the world, and then how do they want to contribute in the world.
Thank you, Kamara. So one last question before we wrap this up. I'm curious, you mentioned that some of these institutions, right, the ones you referred to that were elitist and reinforcing notions of that, you mentioned that a lot of the different people who got connected when it comes to certain VCs and investing, they also went to some of those same schools. I'm thinking about Black and brown students, right, who are not in some of these networks, whether it's for a job to get a particular internship somewhere, or whether it's to get funding somewhere. I'm kind of curious, how are we solving for them right now currently? And I guess, what would you like to see when it comes to that?
Well, that's what affirmative action was supposed to be about, right? To sort of right the wrongs that had been happening historically and ensure that people could access. Because to me, it's not really about the quality of education. I don't really think that that's the thing that's great about going to these elitist schools. It's the network that you have access to. It's the proximity to wealth, and the proximity to what we have currently defined as success, even though I think we should change the definition of success. And so that's why that's that's the cachet of going to the elite school, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's to have that access to a particular network, and it's a particular image of success.
Right.
So as affirmative action, as these DEI, anti-DEI policies are going into place, what's going to happen to Black and Brown students? Well, I think a few things. I think what's great actually is that like a lot of the Black and Brown students are getting a lot of these graduating with high school diplomas, associate's degrees, are getting these certifications, are getting these sort of training courses, and are moving away from being in a debt society. That being said, Black women actually hold the largest amount of student loan debt in the United States currently, which makes sense because we're correlated as the most highly educated from a college and master's kind of standpoint. But I think if we're thinking about the newer generation, we are certainly trying to get, because I think a lot of us are jaded. So we are certainly like, don't do the things that we did. And I'll tell you, when I was a teacher, there was a program where the kids could go to our local community college for free for 2 years. They did that for 2 years, kept up a good GPA. Then they could go to our 4-year state universities again for free. And so I was telling I was like, do that. Okay,
Yeah.
do that. And then there was another program with one of the bigger employers who were like, come get paid, and then you could do, then you can go and do your associates at night. And I was like, or do that, whichever one makes the most amount of sense.
Wow.
Don't go into debt. Don't take out student loan debt. So, and so a lot of those students who are now adults are like, thank you so much for encouraging me not to do that. So I don't have student loan debts that I have to worry about, right? They don't have to think about that as a budget. And so that was, and I was talking about that in the early 2000s before this is even becoming a thing. But I was like, there's something not right about student loan debt. And I just didn't feel comfortable telling my kids, go fill out your FAFSA form and get some student loans. I was like, nah, let's not do that. Let's do, and, thankfully we had those programs, but now I'm like, let's do grants. Let's look at scholarships. Let's look at all kinds of ways where we can mitigate your costs. And then let's actually think, is college your best ROI, return on investment? So anyway, I think that from a Black and Brown diverse perspective, we're seeing that actually more in those communities. And I actually think that that's going to be, in the long run, much better. But as you know, in my other life as an investor and some of the other things I'm doing, we are trying to diversify who are investors, right? So we want to bring more women into the investment space. We want to bring more Black people in the investment space. We want to bring more Native American, Indigenous, Hispanic into the investment space, because investors invest into what they know. And so if you know your community, you trust your community, you have the same norms as your community, then the investment dollars will start to become more diversified. The reason why the investments stay in one particular place, and they'll tell you, oh, well, because I know these people in my network, I know this. Well, okay, white men know white men. So that's why they get the majority of the funds. So now the idea is to just diversify the amount of people and the type of people who are investors. So that's like another conversation. But I think simultaneously, you're seeing all of these changes. You also see a lot of people trying to push back against these changes. But I think ultimately the changes are going to happen, and it's going to have a better outcome. Right now, though, while we're going through those changes, it's going to feel insecure. It's going to feel a little turbulent. But I want everyone to have faith. Rest assured, do the things you need to do to self-care and protect your peace as much as possible during these times of upheaval. But I think when we come out of these times of upheaval, we're going to see a different society that's actually much better for the majority of people. Period.
Wow. What a powerful discussion. I think we definitely dived into some things. I saw some comments too as well, and I think this is a really important thing for people to just, continue to think about throughout the week, just how we're engaging with our education system, how we are, stepping out to make sure that it's better for the next generation or this current generation coming up, that they have more opportunities to not get into debt, and also opportunities to really leverage and get the best ROI.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey. I love that we're doing this. And so we will be back here again next week. Sometime in the morning. We haven't decided which day of the week works the best for us yet. So you're just going to be so pleasantly surprised like the rest. But
Right.
you know, it's just like education. You got to be flexible. Things change all the time. So that's what we're doing here. We're going to be a little nimble. But thank you, everyone who has tuned in. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Take care.